Welcome back, guys. Today we're going to continue our college football predictions with Week 14, aka Rivalry Week. Last week, even though mostly every game was on Cupcake Week, I went 22 and 5. Total season record 216 and 76. And normally I'll have a long dragged out intro, but we got 34 games to make predictions for. So we're not going to waste much time. And we're going to start off with Ole Miss taking on Mississippi State in the Egg Bowl. Ole Miss, really both teams I think had bye weeks last week, so that doesn't matter. But Ole Miss, they're in play for the SEC title game, and for them to get in, they need to win. Texas need to win, or more so, A&M need to lose, and Alabama need to lose. That's how Ole Miss could get in. First, they need to take care of business themselves in this game. And yes, rivalry week. You know these games. I know Ole Miss is favored by 7.5 points, which I'm still gonna take. But you never know with the games like these or games like this. Anything can happen. And now we got the University of Utah taking on the Kansas Jayhawks. And for Utah, they had a wild game last week against Kansas State. And Kansas, well, they lost to Iowa State, and they need to win this game if they want any chance to go bowling. But taking on Utah, yeah, that's pretty doubted. But for Utah, there's a Big 12 game scenario for them because they need to win. BYU actually needs to win, and Arizona, more importantly, Arizona State needs to lose if Utah wants to get in. Or better yet, I think BYU needs. But shouldn't BYU need to lose for them to get in, or some tiebreaker like that? It's weird, but anyway, I'm still taking Utah to win this game. No one notices, but they're more closer to that top 12, 1 through 12 seed of the playoff than you think. And if they make the Big 12 championship game, it will really enhance their chances of getting in the playoff. Now we got the Iowa Hawkeyes and the Nebraska Cornhuskers. I forgot what rivalry this name is called, but whatever. Iowa last week, they got a win over Michigan State. Nebraska, they got tore up from the flow up by Penn State. And mostly you could blame the injuries for that. And this one, I'm going to take Iowa. They usually owns this rivalry. And I think this game's going to be no different. And then we got a game that actually would have been bigger if one of these teams would have gotten their act together. Talking about the Georgia Bulldogs taking on the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. And unlike this game was supposed to be played at Georgia Tech, however, this game is being moved to the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta for some reason. Who knows? Who cares? We know Georgia, they had a cupcake team in UNC Charlotte, but Georgia Tech, they had an opportunity. They had a big opportunity. All they had to do was win their game against Pitt, and they were going to the ACC title game. It was that, but nope. Apparently, no one wants to win the ACC these days, as they lost to Pitt, and all their hopes is now pretty much gone. But for Georgia, there's still hope for them to make the SEC title game and possibly land back in this building the very next week. But in order for that to happen, several things need to happen. They need to win, Bama need to lose, or A&M needs to lose. They need Ole Miss actually to win, and they'll win the three-way tie with Alabama, Ole Miss based on their winning percentage. And with Georgia actually playing their best football right now, I gotta go with the Bulldogs to win this one. Georgia Tech, I mean, you had your chance. And following that, real quick, we got Indiana and Purdue. Indiana, they have a scenario. All they got to do is win, and they're in. Simple as that. And playing against Purdue, they shouldn't have a problem with it. And then we have a big time matchup between the Texas A&M Aggies taking on the Texas Longhorns. A&M, well, they shut out Samford, but Texas, they had a decent showing against Arkansas, and it was one of the best games Arch Manning has played. And matter of fact, outside of that Georgia game, Arch Manning started to look better and better as the season goes on. But this game is mostly important for Texas A&M. They need to win. Simple. They win, they're in the SEC title game. Or Bama need to lose and Ole Miss need to lose if they were to somehow slip up against in this game. This matchup, this is where rivalry week stands out because a game like this, you would think Texas A&M should mop the floor with Texas, but it's rivalry week and A&M is only favored by 3 points or 2.5 points. It's one of those you just don't know. But I am going to lean slightly towards Texas A&M to win, only because they have a little more to play for, and I do love their defense. Texas, I'm sorry. Then we got the Battle of Arizona, where the Wildcats will be taking on the Sun Devils. Arizona, they beat Baylor last week despite a pretty slow start. And Arizona State, I believe they played West Virginia and won that. But this game is important for Arizona State because they need a lot of help if they want to make it back to the Big 12 title game. And the scenario is this. They need to win, Texas Tech to somehow lose, Utah to somehow lose, and Cincinnati to somehow lose. If all three of those teams lose and they somehow win, they're going to make it to the Big 12 title game. And even though Arizona is favored by 1 point, by almost 2 points in this one, again, rivalry week, these two teams actually have identical records. You just don't know. But I am going to pick the home team in this scenario. I'm going to go ahead and take Arizona State to win this game. And yeah, they have to just wait. If Utah wins, this game ain't going to really matter besides rivalry hopes. And since I have Utah winning, that's what I'm leaning towards. And now we're on to the Saturday slate, where speaking of Texas Tech, here they are taking on West Virginia. And, well, their scenario is pretty simple. If they got to win, and you're in. Point blank, period. Or, if they somehow slip up in this game, which, spoiler alert, they're not, they need BYU to lose to get in. So, but like I said, Texas Tech shouldn't have a problem in this one. This game has a lot riding on the table. You got the Miami Hurricanes taking on the Pitt Panthers. Pitt saving their playoff hopes with a big win over Georgia Tech, and that's a week 1 remove of getting blasted by Notre Dame. Meanwhile, Miami, they had a decent road victory over Virginia Tech. Nothing too big out of the ordinary. And yet for some reason they're still the highest ranked ACC opponent, and Miami, they can't get in the ACC tournament. ACC game, championship game. They blew their chance, and I don't know why. But basically, this is a very important game for Miami in more ways than one. For them, since they're the highest ranked ACC team, they need to win. Not only win, but they need to blow out and blast Pitt to get the playoff committee to look at them. But for Pitt, let's talk. They actually do have a ACC scenario. They need to win. Virginia needs to lose, or SMU need to lose if they want a chance to go to Charlotte. And this is one of those games I could see going in any direction. If Miami wins close, they're not getting in that playoff. I don't even think they're getting in the playoff anyway. But I'm actually gonna go with Pitt. They're at home. That Georgia Tech game, they should be feeling a bit of a high in this one. And yeah, but again, I think this one could also go in any direction. Now we got University of Houston taking on the Baylor Bears. Houston, I actually don't remember what they did. They actually lost to TCU at home last week. Baylor, they lost to Arizona last week. And I think Baylor, they need to win this game to become bowl eligible. They're favored. They're at home. I'm gonna go ahead and lean towards Baylor to take this win, but I will not be surprised if Houston takes it. Then we got the Battle of Kentucky, where the Kentucky Wildcats will be taking on the Louisville Cardinals. Louisville, well, actually, both teams are coming off of blowout losses. One lost to Vanderbilt, and the other lost to SMU. Granted, Louisville they did not have their starting quarterback in that game, so I'm not really going to fault them too much on this one. And this game right here, again, it's rivalry week. Anything can happen. And you know what? I was going to take Louisville, but something in my heart, so I don't know what it is, telling me to take Kentucky. Because they are playing better football in recent weeks. Okay, outside of that Vanderbilt game. And with this being a big rivalry game, a lot is going to be on the line. And for Kentucky, they win this game, they're bowl eligible. So there's that. Then we got then we got the Battle of South Carolina, a state that I'll be in this weekend. Not for this game. Clemson and the University of South Carolina. And both of these teams are having pretty disappointing seasons. But at least both of these teams won their non-conference opponents against Furman and Coastal Carolina, respectively. And with this big rivalry matchup, now South Carolina, they're not in bowl play anymore. They're out. Clemson, they actually clinched their bowl bid last week. In this game, yeah, ooh, okay. I don't even know if South Carolina could come in, win, play for pride, but that's all they got going for them. Pride and nothing else. Clemson, I think they have a little more for them, and even though South Carolina is favored at home, I'm gonna go ahead and take Clemson to win this game. I'll go ahead and take them to win. I think on a talent wise, I think Clemson is a little better than South Carolina. Then we got the Colorado Buffaloes taking on the Kansas State Wildcats. Kansas State, they're coming off a wild game against Utah where they scored 47 points and still lost. Meanwhile, Colorado, I need to correct something that I said I need to correct something that I said recently and a few moments ago where I thought Arizona State thought they took on West Virginia last week. Turned out they took on Colorado. My apologies there. I don't have a script in front of me. This is me going off the brain. And Colorado did lose that game. But Colorado has nothing to play for except for their pride and dignity. Kansas State need to win, become bowl eligible at 6-6. I'm taking them to win this game, especially if they play it like they played last week. Do I have to talk about this? Iowa State, Oklahoma State. What's more to say? Oklahoma State just want the suffering to end. Let's just move on. And then we got UCF taking on BYU. And UCF, they won the Tank Bowl last week. Yes, college football do have Tank Bowls, against Oklahoma State, and for some reason, they're still alive in bowl play. They'll be taking on the BYU Cougars, who are coming off a big road game over Cincinnati. Now, BYU has one simple scenario. They need to win, and they're headed to Dallas or Arlington, Texas for the Big 12 title game. But if they somehow lose, they also need Utah to lose. They need Arizona State actually to win, or they can use an Arizona State victory, or they need to use a Texas Tech loss. Other words, BYU basically controls his own destiny. And taking on UCF, yeah, they shouldn't have a problem here. UCF is one of the worst teams in the Big 12. Even though they have 5 wins, let's be real, they're not making that bowl play. Speaking of ugly games, and what do you know? This game's on the CW. Boston College, Syracuse. Ugh. Syracuse. They gave up 70 points to Notre Dame. Boston College. I don't even know what they did last week. Who knows? Who cares? And I'm going to take Boston College to win this game because at least they didn't give up 70 points last week. But man, this is going to be one of the ugliest games of the season. And now we got Oregon taking on Washington. Oregon, they got coming off a big win over USC. And Washington, they're coming off a big win themselves, beating on who did they beat last week? Can't remember what they did last week, but I know they won. I know that much. And looking at this game, Oregon does have a small scenario. I think they need to win and have Ohio State lose, and they're in the Big 12 title game. Something with tiebreakers, but I could be wrong there. In this matchup, I'm going to expect this to be a good battle. I think this is going to be a pretty good game. I'm going to go ahead and take Oregon to win, but I think Washington is really going to give this all they have and then some. Now we got LSU and Oklahoma. LSU scored 13 points against Western Kentucky. I mean, they won the game, but that's not a good sign. They'll be taking on the Oklahoma Sooners, where they beat Missouri in a pretty low scoring game. It wasn't pretty. The best football was not being played, but at this point, a win's a win. And with that, they picked up their 5th ranked win in the season, and that is the most any team has in college football, surpassing Alabama. Oklahoma, they have a simple scenario. If they win this game, they're pretty much in the college football playoff. Simple as that. And in this matchup, taking on pretty much a dead LSU team, I don't think they shouldn't have a problem in this one. But you never know. And now we got the Razorbacks hosting the Missouri Tigers. Arkansas they didn't play that bad against Texas. I mean, they put up 30 plus points against them. But I really feel bad for Taylon Green. Meanwhile, for Missouri, Bo Perbula came back, but they only scored 6 points against Oklahoma. And I have a feeling that when they win this game, which I think they are, the College Football Playoff Committee is going to put them back in the top 25 polls. Now we got a battle of Tennessee. And I think this one's going to be a pretty good matchup. We got the Vanderbilt Commodores taking on Rocky Top. Both these teams are coming off of blowout wins in the SEC. Vanderbilt getting a blowout win against Kentucky, and Tennessee going on the road and beating Florida for the first time they drained the swamp in over 2 decades. In this matchup, this one I think can go in another one I could think could go in any direction. But I feel like more is at stake for Vanderbilt. Yes, Vanderbilt. Because if they win this game, who knows what happens to them? They might have a they might have a case for the college football playoff. Yeah, I know. It's shocking in this world. Try saying that about 5 years ago. Tennessee, they're favored at home, and they're coming off, I think, their best game of the season. So, oh boy, I don't know who to choose. I really don't know. Part of me wants to take Vanderbilt to win. Part of me want to take Tennessee to win. Then again, this is a tough one to pick, but I'm gonna go with Vanderbilt. I do, even though they're not favored in this one, I do like their story. I like the Cinderella, and I'm always gonna root for the underdog in this situation. Actually, let me take that back. They are the underdogs in this situation. I'm still gonna take Vanderbilt to win. Let's move on to Wisconsin and Minnesota. I think this is the battle of the Little Brown Jug. Wisconsin's coming off a big win. Yes, they won over Illinois. And I've actually been kind of impressed on recent victories they ripped off, given that this team was pretty much dead in the water a few weeks ago. Minnesota, on the other hand, they're coming off a heartbreaking loss to Northwestern, as I feel like it's destiny for Minnesota. As yes, I am taking them to win this game. Their destiny is to go 7-5. And if they win this game, history will repeat itself again. And now we got this game actually have some layers. Penn State taking on Rutgers. Whoever wins this game will be bowl eligible. The other goes home. And in this matchup, Penn State coming off a blowout win over Nebraska, and Rutgers coming off a loss to number one ranked Ohio State. And again, I'm not gonna fault them too much. They took on the number one team, and for a little bit they played decent. But Penn State right now, they're playing. I feel like they're playing better football than them. I think they're gonna go on the road, get the victory, and become bowl eligible. Then we got Wake Forest taking on the Duke Blue Devils. Wake coming off a win over Delaware. They actually played a non-conference opponent. And Duke coming off a win over the North Carolina Tar Heels. Yet I know that was pretty hard for me to say that. But hey, they got the win. They kept the victory bell for another year. And they ended Carolina hopes on going bowling. And in this one could go in any direction. Duke is favored by like 2 points. But I feel like every time I pick Duke to win, they somehow let me down. Especially when they're favored, when they're slight favorites. But every time I go against that, they find a way to win. So yeah, I've gone back and forth. This is another game that could go in any direction. I've gone back and forth several times over. And you know what? I'm going to go ahead and take Duke. They're favored and they're at home. That does give them a little bit of an edge. Now we got the Cincinnati Bearcats taking on TCU. TCU's coming off a road victory over Houston. Cincinnati's coming off a home defeat over BYU. And I'm actually kind of surprised that TCU's a home favorite in this one. And you know what? Home favorite at home. Last game of the season. I'll go ahead and take those odds. And then we got the Battle of Florida, where the Florida State Seminoles will be taking on, well, the Florida Gators. Florida State's coming off a Friday night loss to NC State. And Florida, well, their season's pretty much dead. They got blown out by Tennessee. But things are at stake for Florida State. If they win this game, they're bowl eligible. But if they lose this game, they're not going bowling. And this actually, in some hindsight, it actually hurts the team that they played first in Alabama. whom Florida State somehow beat. So in this matchup, I know Florida is favored at home, slight favorites, but I'm actually gonna go with Florida State to win. And watch, since I picked Florida State, they're gonna find a way to let me down. And then we got the Battle of Virginia, where the Virginia Tech Hokies will be taking on the Virginia Cavaliers. Virginia Tech's coming off a loss to Miami, and and the Cavaliers, well, they're pretty much the favorite to win the ACC. And here's their scenario: they need to win, or they need Pitt to lose, or they need SMU to lose. One of these two teams. That's if, and the last two is if Virginia somehow slips up with their in-state rivals. But I don't think that's going to be the case. I think the Cavaliers will take care of business, book their trip to Charlotte, and get the win over the Hokies. And, well, yeah, another college tank bowl. Maryland and Michigan State. Remember when Maryland was 4-0? I remember. Things were looking right. Then October came and everything fell off. As for Michigan State, less said about them the better. I'm just gonna pick Michigan State to win, but just trust me, that's an educated guess. And then we have a game that everyone's gonna have their eye on: the Alabama Crimson Tide taking on the Auburn Tigers in the Iron Bowl. And this is one of the college football's best rivalries. And that's what I would. And this rivalry is only effective if it's played in Jordan Hare. But the reason why everyone's gonna have their eyes on this one, because if Alabama somehow loses, their what happens to their playoff hopes? Who's gonna go to the SEC title game? Because all Alabama has to do is win. Well, let me win, and since they have a three-way tie over Ole Miss and Georgia, if assuming that they both win, they're gonna go to the SEC title game thanks to opponent winning percentage. But they can also get in. They need to win, and A&M to somehow lose. They need to win, and somehow Ole Miss need to lose. In other words, Bama needs to win at all costs. For Auburn, what's at stake for them? They need to go a sixth win to become bowl eligible. And since this game's being played in the Jordan Hare, anything can happen. But I don't think this game's gonna be chaotic this year. Every other year, this rivalry is great. I'm not counting when Auburn goes to Tuscaloosa. Nothing of significant comes out of those. But I think Alabama will find a way to get the win, even though they have not been playing great football the last 2 weeks. And yes, I am counting that Eastern Illinois game where Ty Simpson threw 2 picks. Ryan Williams and Gio Bernard did not play. But I'm still taking Alabama to win. But it's gonna be a bit of a dogfight. Then we got UCLA taking on USC. And USC is coming off a loss to Oregon. UCLA is coming off an embarrassing defeat in Washington. What will possibly be the final game played in the Rose Bowl for them, as UCLA is on the verge of moving to SoFi Stadium, which I think will make their situation a lot worse. USC is favored by double digits at home. I'm not going against that. Then we have Northwestern taking on Illinois, the Battle of Illinois, where Northwestern got a win over Minnesota to become bowl eligible, while Illinois coming off a loss to Wisconsin. I mean, you just don't know what Illinois team you're going to get in every week. They're very, very inconsistent. But at home against Northwestern, I I'm going to safely pick them to win this game. Am I confident in this pick? Absolutely not. Then we got the Battle of North Carolina, as the Tar Heels will be taking on the Wolfpack. Tar Heels losing to Duke, they're now 0-2 against in-state rivals. They could complete the 0-3 trifecta against NC State. Who are they? They're coming off a big win over Florida State. They're now bowl eligible, and now they're stuck in the same cycle of Dave Doeren. And being at home, Carolina is not a good football team. I'm gonna go with the Wolfpack to win. But even in recent history, State has dominated the Tar Heels. Then we got SMU taking on the California Bears. As SMU coming off a big time win over Virginia, while California coming off an embarrassing loss to Stanford, which cost their coach the job. You don't lose those rivalry games. But for SMU, they do have a scenario, but sadly, I didn't really written it down. But I know if they win, they're pretty much in. If they lose, and let's say Pitt wins, I think it's gonna be Virginia and Pitt. It could be Virginia Pitt. Well, I don't know. I gotta go back and look and see what happens with that scenario. But for SMU, I do think they're gonna win. I actually think they're gonna dominate this game, so they can book their trip back to Charlotte for the second year in a row. And then our after dark game of the week. It's really Notre Dame and Stanford. I mean, Stanford is coming off of pretty much their best game of the season against California, where I don't think they care about anything else happening. They could just win that game and go off their own merry way. While Notre Dame's coming off a blowout victory over Syracuse, and I think they made a statement to all of college football. The 30-point favorites, yeah, Notre Dame shouldn't have a problem here. Just get the win, they'll clinch a playoff spot, keep it moving. And last but not least, our game of the week, it is the taking on Michigan. These two teams, they do not like each other. And I think that's an understatement. Let's talk about the first, as they coming off a blowout victory over Rutgers, while Michigan is coming off a big win. They also had a decent win last week. And trying to remember who did they beat last week. It's gonna pop up in my mind very, very swiftly. They played Maryland last week, and they took care of business. This gonna be, I would say this is a big game, but I feel like this is a very important game for Ohio State. Sure, if they win, they need if they win, they're in the Big 12, Big 10, well, Big 10 title game, simple as that. But if they somehow slip up, they need Indiana to somehow also slip up and USC to somehow slip up. And I don't see those two teams slipping up. So Ohio State, their only scenario is to win. But they're going to the big house. And I think the big house has been waiting for them. We know, and yes, we are fully aware of Ohio State losing 4 straight to Michigan. I mean, that's almost borderline unheard of. Try saying that about 6 years ago. But in the back of my mind, I've been saying this all season. I mean, I haven't said it out here, but in the back of my mind, I've been saying this. Ohio State is going to dominate every single opponent. Well, outside of Texas, but we're not talking about that right now. I said, told myself they're going to lose to Texas, which I was wrong, win out all these games, then when they go to Michigan, they'll find a way to lose. And you know what? I'm going to be a man of my word. I'm taking Michigan this year to win, because 4 straight years I've taken Ohio State, and what happens? They lose. This time, I'm going with the Michigan Wolverines to get the huge upset win, and this will cause chaos in the college football playoffs. And that concludes this college football week 14 predictions. Yes, this was a very, very long one, and I'm not going to apologize for it. But tell me what y'all think in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Hopefully everyone has a good Thanksgiving, and I hope on Thanksgiving weekend you gamble safely. Also, happy rivalry week, everyone, and I'll see you next time.